Hello friends, and welcome to another episode of the Woldenburn podcast. My name is Emily, and I am coming to you from Kentucky in the United States, where I live with my husband and our little boy. Thank you so much for being here today. I know it has been a few weeks since my last podcast episode. It's just kind of been, not like actually busy, but it just feels like mentally busy. There's just kind of been a lot of different things going on. If you didn't watch my last video, which I know it was probably not everyone's cup of tea, it was my Make 9 video talking about all of the knitting plans that I'm hoping to do this year. But in that video, I made the announcement that my husband and I are expecting our second baby due later on in the summer, and that's the biggest reason why things have just been a little bit weird, I think. I think my pregnancy hormones are kind of going wonky, and I just hit 16 weeks, and so the first trimester wasn't too bad or anything, but I think that there's just kind of been, pregnancy is a very hormonally rich phase. There's all kinds of things going on in your body trying to grow a baby, and I think that that has just been impacting me mentally, emotionally, all that fun stuff. And then add on to that, baby Tam, our toddler, he's about 1.5 years old. He is still currently nursing. However, once I hit 15 weeks, my body was like, all right, we're about done with this whole nursing thing. We're growing a new baby. And my milk supply just drastically changed almost overnight. So I think pregnancy hormones and then like nursing hormones and all of that stuff have just been, they've been having a party and having a lot of fun, and it's been interesting for me mentally, emotionally, not necessarily in a very negative way, but it's kind of been a lot. Let's just put it that way. It's been a lot. Even though it hasn't been busy, like we haven't been doing tons of stuff, it just feels like a lot is going on. But anyway, so yeah, we're very, very excited about it. I'm excited because in a few weeks we're probably going to find out whether we're having a girl or a boy, which is just going to be, it's just fun. It's a fun adventure. Either way, it doesn't matter. I just want a healthy baby, but it is fun to find that out. Anyway, moving on from that, I have knitting to talk about today. I was going to talk about some sewing stuff, but I've decided I'm trying to work at keeping this podcast a bit more focused, I think, so that I can try and do shorter episodes. I've been doing a bunch of like hour-long episodes, and I love it when other people do hour-long episodes. It's my favorite thing ever. But for me personally, in this season of life, it's really challenging to do all the editing for it. The filming's a piece of cake. I can just talk and talk and talk. It's the editing afterwards. So I'm going to be just talking about some knitting today and just the active projects that I've been working on. But quickly, before we get into the video, I had one other quick sort of admin announcement, I guess. Again, if you didn't watch my last video, I mentioned that I had listed some of my hand-dyed yarn up in my shop for sale, my Etsy shop, and I just wanted to mention it here in case you missed it on the last one. I have 2 sweater quantities of DK weight, 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon blend yarns, and these 2 colorways. We have this one, which is honeycomb, it's showing up a little bit warmer on screen than it is. This is a little bit more color accurate. It's kind of a almost cool tone gold. It's really lovely. I really do like it. And then I have this one, which I've called Seabird, which is just sort of a rose gold, gray, speckled, really pretty colorway. Again, I know, even though I dyed it myself. I dyed them intending to make things for myself, but then I have just realized that they're not quite the colors that I want for in my wardrobe right now, and I don't think they're necessarily the most flattering colors for me. So I would really love for these to go to a good home somewhere where somebody can knit something beautiful out of them and make lovely things. So there are 6 skeins of each available. I have them at a little bit of a discounted price. I have them listed at $20 instead of the $25 per skein that I normally do. And then on top of that, I decided that since Valentine's Day was just last week, and I really appreciate all of you being here. If you're watching this video before the end of February, we're just gonna put it at the end of February. So February 29th is the cutoff date. I have a little coupon code for an additional 15% off. It's going to be, I was trying to think if I should do like Love 15 or Happy 15. I think we'll do Happy 15. I'll put it on the screen for you. And if you just put that code in there, you should be able to get an additional 15% off everything in my shop. There's really only these two yarn colorways, and then one other, it's a fingering weight blend colorway. So that's all up in my Etsy shop. I just wanted to let you know a little bit of an update with the Etsy shop, just because I've done a lot of thinking about it, and I really wanted to do more with my Etsy shop this year, but then we're having another baby. I'm a full-time stay-at-home wife and mother, and it's just, there's not a lot of time to do much in an Etsy shop right now. So my plan is this year is I'm going to have one spring release. I'm going to be releasing a mini skein collection on March 19th, which is the first day of spring, and it's going to be a Redwall inspired, pretty, there's going to be a mix of variegated tonals and speckled yarns, and I'm really excited about it. I've been really scheming and thinking about these colors, so I'm hoping to get those dyed up soon so that I can get some sample, like, swatches or something made with it. But that's probably the only thing that's going to happen in my Etsy shop this year. Just because, yeah, being a mom is busier than you think it is. And so I really want to be able to focus on like making YouTube videos and doing things like that, rather than spreading myself too thin and trying to do all the things. So stay tuned for the spring mini skein collection release. And then there's also just a few yarns in my shop right now. And then probably once the spring release is done, once those sell out, because I'm hoping they sell out, because I'm only planning to have like 4 of them available, which is what I did last year for my Redwall Flowers mini skein collection. So if and when they sell out, I'm probably going to put my Etsy shop on vacation mode for the foreseeable future. I would love to do some like notion pouches and things. I had some really cute ideas for that, but oop, that's my pumpkin bread timer. Anyway, I said I would like to do some notion pouches and things, but I'm not going to commit to those necessarily, because I don't want to say I'm going to do them and then I just don't end up doing them. So right now for the plan, if you're interested in my Etsy shop, it's just Woldenburn on Etsy, and I'll have it linked down below. I have some hand-dyed yarn in there right now, and there's going to be one spring mini skein collection release this year, and then that's probably it. So stay tuned, and if you're interested, adopt some beautiful yarns. Anyway, that's it for the admin intro stuff. I'm gonna run check on my pumpkin bread, and then I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Actually, I need to set a timer for the pumpkin bread. I finally, I was going to talk about this in a little life update thing at the end, but I'll mention it here. I finally was able to get some sourdough starter back up and running. Well, I got some sourdough starter from my mom, and then I was using it, and then I gave some to my sister-in-law, and then I accidentally killed my sourdough starter, and so then I was able to snitch some back from her. So I've been doing sourdough stuff again, which I'm really happy about. And there's a sourdough discard pumpkin bread that is literally the best pumpkin bread that I have ever tasted. It is so good. So I'm really happy to be able to make it again, because pumpkin bread, like a good pumpkin bread, is one of my favorite things. But anyway, this is not a cooking podcast. So let's talk about some knitting. Get yourself some tea or water or milk or something, and let's just kick back and talk about some knitting projects. First off, also apologies if I keep like leaning forward. I have all of my stuff on a table right behind the tripod, so that's why. I have 2 finished objects. One I don't actually have here, but I have something else I can show you in place of it, which will make sense in a second. And the other is a pair of socks. Shocker, I have finally finished a pair of socks. It feels like so long since I finished some socks. I think the last pair of socks was a pair of socks that I made for my husband in November, and that was the last finished pair of socks that I made. But I have these socks. I knit them out of a opal yarn in one of the Vincent van Gogh collection colorways, and oh, they're so pretty. This is a very basic, plain, simple vanilla sock recipe. I do 56 stitches on US size 1 2.25 millimeter needles. For these, I think I did about 15 or 20, probably 15 rounds of 1x1 ribbing. And then I decided to make this pair of socks an actual more full-length sock. Normally, if you've been around here for a while, you know, normally I do shorty socks, but I realized that I really only had like 1 or maybe 2 pairs of longer socks, of longer hand knit socks that actually fit me well and whatnot. I think I've just ended up getting rid of a few over the time, and somehow or the other I only have just a couple. And in the winter time, what I really like to do is I wear leggings a lot under my skirts, and so what I like to do is have socks that will go high up enough that they don't leave that weird gap between your leggings and your sock, and then it's like that really like one cold spot. So that's why I did this pair longer. I did a basics slip stitch heel flap and gusset, and then just a regular foot, and then I did a little bit different of a technique thing for the toe for this pair. So I have, if you look at it, it's kind of like a really wedge shaped looking toe. It's kind of a blunt cutoff point, and I realized I've been trying to really like fine tune and figure out my sock knitting recipe thing, and I have realized with my other socks that I tend to wear out. Let me see if I can show you this easily. So I tend to wear out this part right here. It's wanting to focus on me. So if you've got your foot in here, it's like these corner bits along the edges, and I realized that it's because my toes are wider than the space that I'm leaving on my regular socks, if that makes any sense. Because usually what I've been doing is I would decrease down to like 10 or 12 stitches. So it would be a very narrow end of the toe thing here. So I decided to experiment with this pair of socks, and I only decreased down to 16 stitches. So basically I just knit more plain stockinette and did a shorter section of decreasing, and then only decreased down to 16 stitches. It's not 16 stitches. It's 32 stitches total, 16 stitches per needle. That would have confused some people. But yeah, so it's 32 stitches total, but it's 16 stitches per needle, and then I Kitchener stitched it off. And I tried it on, and I was like, oh, this is like the best fitting toe spot that I've done yet. So that's probably how I'm going to be doing all the rest of my toes. It looks a little wonky when it's just the sock, but when it's on, it actually fits really well. So that's what I did for both of those socks, and I'm really excited to see how they end up wearing. I haven't worn them yet because I haven't shown them on the podcast. I finished them in January, actually, and we're 3/4 of the way through February now, and let's see, how do I say this? I entered them into the giveaway that is being hosted by Amy and Jen of Dandelion and Dogwood Yarn Company. And I am really excited to be participating in this knit along. It's a year-long knit along where the goal is to knit 12 pairs of socks total. You enter 1 per month, but the beauty of it is that you can do fingering weight, DK, worsted, whatever. It can be a shorty sock, long sock, whatever. It just needs to be an adult size sock, and whips are allowed, which that's what made it achievable for me. Is I don't think that I can complete a whole pair of socks every single month. Maybe a pair of shorty socks, but just, especially again, with my life right now, it's just, my knitting time is so unpredictable. And so like these socks, I actually had the first sock almost done in January. And so I finished that sock and knit the second sock in January. And it was a whip that had just been languishing for such a long time. And so I'm really, really excited about that. You can check out, Amy has a knitting podcast. I don't know if she's updated the name on her knitting podcast yet. It was the Tayloress, was it still Tayloress Studio podcast? I think that's what it was. She's recently updated like her Instagram name and everything to And Other Knits, but I don't know if she's updated her YouTube channel yet. I'll have it linked down below regardless, and you can watch her most recent podcast episodes where she talked about it, and then you can check out the Dandelion and Dogwood page on Instagram, and that has all the details on it. But I'm really, really excited about it. I'm I've wanted to do these sock year-long, knit-along things before, but they were always kind of strict, if you will, where you have to knit like a whole pair of socks in a month, and they have to be like, you know, full-length socks. You can't do shorty socks. I think there's like a Desert Vista Dye Works or something knit along where they do, where if you do shorty socks, you have to knit 2 pairs of shorty socks in the month, and I'm just like, I can't do that. So I'm very, very excited about this knit along. And I actually have my February socks that I'll talk about in just a minute. They're a work in progress. Let me get a sip of my tea. The other finished object that I said I don't have, but I have basically its identical twin. And for Christmas I knit my husband and my father-in-law hats out of this Drops Charisma yarn, which is a 100% superwash wool yarn. I love it so much. I would love to knit my husband out a sweater out of this. I think that's what I'll do at some point. It's just so nice and soft, and it has a little bit of a rustic feel to it, but it's not like super scratchy. It's just, it feels a little bit sturdier than like a superwash merino yarn, a little bit more hard wearing. So I just knit a bunch of the Pro Soho basic ribbed beanies or basic ribbed hat or something, but I used a worsted weight yarn instead of a DK like the pattern called for. So I went up a needle size. I think I was doing it on a US size 4, which I think is a 3.5 millimeter, but I don't know for sure. So I used a US 4, and then I used the cast on numbers for the, I think it's baby, child, adult small, an adult large maybe? Maybe there's a medium in there. I used the numbers for the second size, the child size, and it worked out absolutely perfectly. So I knit this back in December, but I knit pretty much the same yarn, everything, same stitch count numbers, all that. Basically identical one for my brother-in-law for his birthday. The only difference was that I added like 3 rounds of some purple in there so that they could tell their hats apart. So I don't have that one because I've already gifted it, but it was just another identical hat to this. That is all the finished objects that I have. Technically I have a half finished object. I don't know, sometimes I feel a little bit weird about calling a pair of socks when you finish the first sock a half finished object, because in my head I'm like it is a half finished object, but it's not like a finished object. I don't know. It's a half finished object. That's what they're called these days. Oop, there's my timer again. I'll be back. Gotta go check the pumpkin bed again. Okay, as I was saying, half finished object is my February socks. It's a pair of socks, shorty socks that I am knitting for my husband out of Patton's Croy sock yarn in 2 different colorways. I have the main stripy color, and then I did the heel in just their black yarn, which that was not a fun time. I did an Eye of the Partridge heel, and it just, I've knit him black socks before, but I don't know what it was about this time where I was just like, ugh. And I did the same thing with the toe on this sock where I only decreased down to 32 stitches, and I'm really curious to see how this works on his foot. So I am very lucky in the fact that my husband and I have very similarly sized feet, so I can use the exact same recipe for any socks I knit for my husband as I do for myself, which is lovely. And B, he doesn't like long socks. He says it makes like his leg hair itch or something. I don't know. I'm not a guy. I don't get it, but apparently that's a common complaint. My brothers talked about that too. So I get to knit him shorty socks that are exactly like my socks. So technically, if he ever decides to stop wearing hand-knit socks, I'll just steal them all back. It's all good. So again, exactly the same. 56 stitches, US size 1, 2.25 millimeter needle. For my husband, I typically do 10 rounds of 1x1 ribbing and then about 10 rounds of just plain stockinette for the cuff before I start the heel. For this one, I did the Eye of the Partridge heel, which you cannot see anything because it's a black yarn. And then I just did standard decreases down to that wider wedge box toe thing. The one thing about Patton's Croy yarn, I think I've knit 4 pairs of socks in Patton's Croy yarn now, and in the previous colorways that I have used, it is a much, much thicker yarn than like your standard fingering weight yarn. However, with this one, I found that it's not. This main colorway is like a standard, it feels like a standard fingering weight yarn width, circumference, whatever. But like the black yarn is definitely a spongier, thicker yarn. So I don't know, I have to pay attention to that because my plan is to go down in, my plan was to go down in stitch count and just use the same needle size, but to go down in the stitch count to make it so that the sock was not quite so big and bulky. Because the 3 pairs of other socks that I've knit in Patton's Croy, they are loose. They're bigger on my feet, and so I've been wanting to do a little bit of experimenting with some of the Patton's Croy yarn and figure out a slightly different sock recipe for that. And so that's what I initially started with these. I cast on, I think, like 48 or something stitches, and then I was like knitting it, and I was just, this yarn feels like regular yarn. This is gonna be too small, so I had to frog it and start all over. So just be aware of that. Patton's Croy is not always necessarily the most consistent yarn, apparently. And then I have gone ahead and started the second sock. I have just finished the heel flap and I'm about to do the heel turn, and then it's smooth sailing all the way to the end. So yeah, and double pointed needles. That is my preferred way to do sock knitting. I just like how it feels. So that's that, work in progress. And then I do have one other sock whip to talk about quickly. I was intending this other one to be my February socks, but then it got down to it and I'm working on a test knit at the moment. And I was like, you know what? I'm just not sure that I'm gonna have time to finish this pair of socks in time. So that pair of socks for my husband was actually a whip. So I had the first sock already started, and it's a basic stockinette stitch sock, so I was able to just fly through it. And so I'm doing those for my February socks for the knit along, the Dandelion and Dogwood knit along, which works because February has Valentine's Day, so it's the month of love. So I am loving my husband by making him socks. That's my theory, what I'm doing. But this other pair of socks that I am knitting for myself, I'm very, very excited about. I am finally knitting another pair of Mercury socks, which is a free pattern by, I believe it's Kim Drotar. And this was the second sock pattern, I think, that I ever knit, or the second sock. Yeah, second sock pattern that I ever knit. I knit like a basic vanilla sock, and then I knit this pattern, which is crazy to me to think about now. But the yarn that I had used, I didn't know really anything about picking the appropriate yarn for socks at the time. And so I had picked some baby yarn. I think it was a blend of acrylic and wool maybe or something. I'm not 100% sure, but it was definitely more of like probably a sport or a DK weight, even though it said it was a fingering weight. It was kind of similar in, I think, to like Patton's Croy, where it claims that it's a fingering weight yarn, but it really isn't most of the time. So they ended up way too big and loose and stuff, and I got rid of them years ago. Like, this was a long time ago. So ever since then, I have been wanting to knit another pair of the Mercury socks because I think they're a really beautiful lace sock pattern. So I'm finally doing it. And you might recognize this yarn. This is the Barocco Vintage Sock yarn in the Rhubarb colorway. I actually had cast on a pair of socks last Valentine's Day out of this yarn, and I was kind of making up my own sock pattern and doing stuff. And it sat for months. It sat there for so long. It was kind of ridiculous. So I finally frogged it at one point. I was like, obviously I'm not really enjoying this. I had just picked a stitch pattern out of one of my knitting stitch dictionaries, and I was like, obviously I'm not really enjoying this. We're just gonna frog it and I'll pick it back up and do a different sock with it another day. I'm finally doing that. So I'm really excited about this because I have knit my husband 2 pairs now of socks out of the Barocco Vintage Sock, and I really like it. I really, really like this yarn. I think that it is an excellent sock yarn. Pumpkin bread. just needs to hurry up and be done already. Anyway, let me finish what I was saying. I think that the Barocco Vintage sock is an excellent sock yarn. It is a blend of acrylic, wool, and nylon, I believe. And I knit him one of the pairs of socks. One of them was the one that I mentioned that I finished in November, so he hasn't really worn those that much. But the other one was a pair that I finished knitting for him at Christmas of 2022, and they have worn so well. I recently went through and washed a bunch of our hand knit socks, and I was looking at them, and I was just like, they hardly look like they've been worn at all. Like they look almost brand new. And he doesn't wear his hand knit socks over the summer, so that's like half the year that he doesn't wear them, but he does wear them the rest of the time, and he just wears them in like shoes and around the house and everything. So he's not like, you know, precious about his hand knit socks. He wears them like they're normal socks, and they look so good still. So I think that probably for the most part, like obviously I'm knitting him a pair of socks out of Patton's Koi, but for the most part, I think I'm going to stick with knitting him socks out of that vintage sock blend because it just seems to hold up really well. So I'm excited to knit myself a pair of socks because I think I do wear my hand knit socks a little bit more than he does. So I'm excited to finish this pair of socks for myself in that yarn so that I can wear them and see if they really do hold up very well. But right now I am very impressed with the sock yarn and I really, really like it. So those are my sock projects. Again, gonna run check on my pumpkin bread, and then I have 2 other whips that I'm gonna quickly talk through, and then yeah, we'll see where we go from there. Okay, I've actually decided we're only going to talk about one more work in progress because I was thinking about it. And the second one that I was going to talk about, I've only done a couple rounds on it, so I'm going to save it for next time because I've been itching to work on it some more, but we're not going to talk about it in detail. I'll give you a little sneak peek now that I've mentioned it. It is my Crescendo Summer Top, which is a pattern by the Knit Pro Girl that I am knitting out of this gorgeous Mystery Mouse Yarn Co. yarn. And I've set this one aside, so I have not done much work on it at all, but I picked it up the other night and I was just like, oh, I miss this. I want to get this done. So I did a few rounds on it. I'm hoping to work on it a little bit more. But the other project is the test knit that I mentioned, and I have been putting in probably 95% of my knitting time into it. I'm so excited about it. I'm so proud of it too. Like, it's definitely, I think this might be the most complicated knitting project that I've ever done. But yeah, let me show you quickly. I was very lucky, privileged, whatever you want to call it, to be selected to be part of the Lauder test knit by Rebecca of the Cray Bay podcast. She has designed some beautiful, beautiful knitting patterns, and I have wanted to test knit for her for quite some time. I've been following her ever since she first started doing her knitting podcast, and then she started getting into pattern designing, and it's been so much fun to kind of watch that journey. But I've been really wanting to test knit for her, and so she announced that she was doing the Lauder pattern, which is a all over cabled. The pattern's going to include a sweater, a cardigan, and a vest, and each one of those will have a V-neck or a round neck option. And I have been wanting a top-down round neck vest pattern for a while. I was really looking into it in the fall, and I couldn't seem to find a pattern that I liked, that worked, and so I was extra excited when she announced this one, and I applied and was accepted to be in the test knit to do the round neck vest version. And, oh, I'm so happy about it. Like I said, it's an all over cabled knit project. It's a little bit hard to see in this yarn because it's such a, I don't know, it's more of a tonal rather than a variegated yarn, but it has some variance in the tonal. So it's a little bit harder to see the actual like texture and stuff of it. But I am so happy with how this is coming along. It is definitely one of the, like I said, one of the most challenging patterns I've done so far. It's not hard, it's just something that I have to pay attention to, and the construction is different than I think I've ever done before. You start with the back and then you work flat for a while and then you put that on hold and then you pick up and you knit the two fronts individually and you connect those and then you work those flat for a while and then you connect it all in the round. And it's so fascinating. I know a lot of people have kind of talked about it. I don't know if this is what's considered the contiguous shoulder method. I'm not sure. I've never done anything like this before, and it was so fascinating to kind of watch it come to life. And the other really cool thing is the way that she's done the increases and decreases, where this cable runs like all the way along. It just looks so good. So I have been working and spending so much time on this, and it, like I said, it's one of those ones that I really have to pay attention to, so I can't work on it when baby Tam's around. So the only time that I've been able to work on it has been nap times, but then not every single nap time. Some nap times I can't because I'm doing household stuff, or sometimes his naps just don't end up being long enough, or I'm filming a podcast and then I don't have time. So it has been really kind of inconsistent, honestly, but I've been putting pretty much every minute of my knitting time into working on this. And that is one of the things that I absolutely love about Rebecca's, I don't know, knitwear designing philosophy, where she is really working towards having very, I don't know, all knitter friendly test knit deadlines. So for this one, I think it was an 8 or 9 week test, and it was the same amount of time for all of the garments, whether you were doing the pullover, cardigan, or vest, which was why I felt comfortable applying, because I knew that I was probably going to have very inconsistent knitting time, and I didn't think I could do a full-on like all over garment. But with this, there's no sleeves, so once I finish the body and pick up and do the arm ribbing, I'm done. And I so appreciate the fact that she does very lengthy test knit time frames, and she's working towards, I think, getting up to a 12-week test knit. And I just think that's so amazing, because that means that somebody like me who has less knitting time will feel more comfortable applying, because there's a good long cushion time. Like, I think I still have about a month left on this test knit, and I so appreciate that. There's been a few different designers who's I've signed up for their test knitting emails or whatever, and they'll have like a fully cabled long sleeved sweater in 4 weeks that they want you to knit it in 4 weeks, and it blows my mind. Like, maybe some people out there are like much faster at knitting like cables and things than I am, but still, like, 4 weeks, people, like, come on. So that has meant that I have not applied for mini test knits, because that seems to be a kind of common thing, and at least for the test knitting things that I've signed up for. So I've just kind of gotten off of most of those test knitting lists, because I'm like, you just aren't doing very stay-at-home mom-friendly test knit deadlines. That was one of the things that I really appreciated about Hannah from Hannah G Knits, is that she has usually about, I think it's 8 to 12 week long test knitting deadlines or time frames, and it's just so achievable. And so I really appreciate that. But anyway, quickly to finish up talking about this, I am knitting this out of my hand-dyed yarn in, this is actually a fingering weight yarn that I am holding double to get the DK weight called for in the pattern, and it is a 75-25 superwash merino nylon blend. I love it. I love how it's looking. My plan with this is to wear it over top of my some of my dresses in the wintertime. I have some long sleeved flannel dresses that I really like, but they're kind of hard to sometimes wear like a sweater or a cardigan over top of it because of the long sleeves, and the sleeves that I've done are much looser, so they're not like a fitted sleeve on the dress. So that was why I really wanted to make a vest, was because I wanted to have that extra warmth on the torso area, but not have to mess with trying to cover over the sleeves. So I'm really looking forward to getting this done and blocking it. I'm knitting it on a US 2.5, which is a 3mm, which is actually one needle size down from that called for in the pattern. Yeah. And so this looks a little small, but it stretches. So it's gonna probably have 0 ease. I specifically picked, I think it's the 3rd size, which was for like a 43-inch bust. I think that was like the finished bust measurement, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Anyway, I specifically picked a slightly smaller size because I know that with pregnancy and nursing and everything, my size and everything is going to fluctuate, but I don't want to knit a bunch of garments that are like huge and like have loads of ease on them now, because then eventually when I'm done having babies and done nursing, or if I have a gap between babies where I'm not pregnant or not nursing, I don't want to have like all these things that are just massive on me. It's not really my style. So any patterns that I've been picking, I picked that are like right at my current bust size and stuff. So it means that they're a little bit more fitted, but I don't mind. And knitted fabric is so forgiving. It will stretch in a lot of ways. And then the one other thing was that for the neckband, you might notice it kind of looks a little bit floppy and weird. I kind of intentionally picked up a few extra stitches on this than was called for in the pattern. There wasn't a specific number that it was called for. It was kind of a pick up a certain number of stitches per number of rows. And so I didn't really worry about that too much, because my plan is to add some elastic in this. I did a double folded neckband, which it's not called for in the pattern. It just calls for just a standard ribbing, but I wanted to do that because I want to put some elastic in it, because then I have a little bit more control over how snug the neckline is. And I've mentioned this before, I'm really sensitive if things are like too snug and up there. It just makes me feel like I'm like choking and gagging. It's even worse when I'm pregnant. So I wanted to make it a little bit looser so that it's like definitely wide and open, and then I can adjust how snugly I pull the elastic. So I have just worked about 1 inch of the body in the round after connecting everything in the round, and I'm so excited. The one other thing is I have this really pretty stitch marker. Now that I'm working in the round, I can actually have a beginning of the round stitch marker. And this is a really pretty one that was gifted to me by Stephanie of Texas Peach Knits. We did a little swap over Christmas, and this was something that she included in the swap, and I love it. So I have been wanting to use it, and so when this project was finally in the round, I was finally able to use it. So that is all that I have for that. I briefly, as quickly as I can, because I know I'm over 30 minutes already, wanted to do a tiny bit of book talk, and then a tiny bit of life update, and then close things off. So I wanted to mention here, I completely forgot about mentioning it in my last podcast episode. I am part of a book club that is hosted or co-hosted, I guess you could say. I'm technically one of the hosts. By Stephanie from Texas Peach Knits and Holly of Mystery Mouse Yarn Knitting Podcast and Mystery Mouse Yarn Co. And it's called the Fancy Reading and Needlecraft Club. I think I got that in the right order. And we are currently in our second round. We're reading the Scarlet Pimpernel. And I completely forgot about mentioning it back before when new people could have joined in. It completely slipped my mind. But I just wanted to go ahead and mention it here. We are kind of in the middle of our second round, so I think that we're supposed to be done reading the book by the end of February. I have not been participating hardly at all this round. Like I said, I've just had a lot kind of going on, and I haven't even stayed up with reading the book, or kept up with reading the book. It's just been kind of a lot. And so instead I have been, it's January and February, and for whatever reason, for the last like 3 years, every time January, February rolls around, I get this huge urge to read like every single Louis L'Amour book that has ever existed. And Louis L'Amour writes Westerns, and I love his Western novels. They are so good. Like the characters that he writes, like he has really strong themes of like having a strong character, being a man of your word, you know, being loyal, being honorable, being and gentlemanly and everything. And I just love it so much. He definitely has a bit more, I guess you could say, of a romanticized version of the Old West, the old American West. His cowboys are never the good guys. Like he has all of his good guys are very good characters, and they're never like foul and crude and, you know, I don't know, gross sorts of like people. They're just very honorable and good men sort of characters, which I really appreciate. I tried to read a Western by, I think it was Zane Grey. I think he's another really popular Western writer, and I just could not get into it. I have been spoiled by Louis L'Amour, because the Zane Grey one, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it almost like it was more of like that gritty, like hardened, whatever, like cowboy, not my style. But anyway, so I've been rereading a million of those books rather than keeping up with the Scarlet Pimpernel like I should be. But it's been exactly what I needed this time of year, because I've been doing a good bit of reading when I have the chance. I read pretty much everything on my Kindle. In this season of my life, since having a baby, I have read 97% of books all on my Kindle, because it's just simpler and easier when you have a toddler around. If you need to stop and throw your book down for a second or whatnot, it's made it easier. And especially when he was nursing more, I did a lot of my reading time was while I was nursing the baby. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of mention that here. We're going to be having our third round of the Fancy Reading Needlecraft Club later in the spring. I think maybe April is the start time. So if you're interested, stay tuned. You can hop into the group. It's a group of lovely ladies who talk about books and knitting and all that fun stuff. And if you're interested in joining, be sure to check out Stephanie from Texas Speech Knits. If you watch, I think it's either her last podcast episode or the one before, she has all the information on how you can join in. We run it over in the Telegram app, and it's really lovely. So I highly recommend that you participate in that if you like reading books. And we're planning to stick with sort of like the classic, good, wholesome literature. So if that sounds like a cup of tea, yeah, be sure to pop over and join us. So that's all of that. I have just a little bit of life update, just a couple of fun little things. Like I said, we've just kind of been, I don't know, there's just been a lot of like adjustments for me, mentally, emotionally. I've mentioned this like 5 times now. So I've had a few days where I've had like a bits of wobbles where I'm just feeling really down on myself and lacking confidence in my motherhood for baby Tam, and just kind of struggling, feeling like I'm not being a sufficient wife or mother or homemaker. But a couple of things that have really helped me have been, I started listening to, or I listened to several of the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast episodes, which is run by Lisa, who does the Farmhouse on Boone like blog and YouTube channel. She has her podcast, which is a Simple Farmhouse Life podcast, and I've listened to several of her podcast episodes where she talked about like mothering and postpartum and babies and all of that stuff, and it was just so refreshing and helpful. I kind of gotten into a spot where I was reading a bunch of other stuff, particularly a blog that was talking about like vintage, applying vintage parenting and mothering and cleaning stuff to like today, and it just made me feel absolutely terrible about myself and about how I was being a homemaker and stuff, and it was just making me feel horrible. So I stopped reading that and I was like, okay, like let's refocus here. And I listened to a bunch of podcasts by Lisa from Farmhouse and Boone, and they were just so like reaffirming and confidence boosting. She has such a simple and wholesome approach to motherhood that I really appreciate. Just like there was a podcast episode where she was talking about meal planning, and it was just so laid back, and it just, yeah, it just seemed to fit much better with my personality. So I really appreciated that. And then I found a blog post that was talking about slow motherhood. And in the blog post, the writer was mentioning that she had put a ton of pressure on herself and whatnot because when she was growing up, her mom never left dirty dishes in the sink overnight. And so she was stressing herself out and making herself like stick to that standard. And her husband was telling her, he was like, you don't have to do that. You know, basically, this is paraphrasing it, but basically just because your mom did it doesn't mean you have to. And that has kind of been one of the biggest things that I have tried to learn since becoming a mom, is that I can love and appreciate my mom, and I can appreciate all the hard work that she did raising us, and I can appreciate how she did it, but I don't have to do things the exact same way. My personality isn't exactly like my mom's, and so everybody's gonna mother or parent a little bit differently, and that's okay. And that's kind of been a tricky thing for me to learn. But I read that blog post and she was talking about that, and she was talking about just basically taking a deep breath and just being okay with things not being perfect. And that really, really resonated with me and really helped me a lot. And then it was like later in the middle of the night, because baby TM has been teething, but he's kind of starting to work on doing a lot better about sleeping. He slept through the night for the first time in his entire life, like a couple nights ago, which was just bonkers. But then of course I've got my pregnancy hormones going on and stuff, so I've been struggling to sleep sometimes. So it's just, we both need to sleep at the same time. Anyway, I was laying there in the middle of the night, and I was just thinking about some of this stuff, and I had this like brain wave, if you will, where I had the realization that I was just like, I don't love my home, I don't love my husband or my child and soon to be children. I don't love them because they're perfect, and I am not loved because I am perfect. We are all like, I love my husband because of his imperfections and just for who he is. Like, it's not, he's not the world's most perfect man. That doesn't exist. You know, God's the perfect man, but we're not going there. Like, in human beings, there is no perfect human being. And I love my husband because he is an imperfect human, and I love him. He's my husband. And so I had that realization, and I kind of applied it to like homemaking in my house, where I was like, I don't love my house because it's this Pinterest perfect museum worthy place. I love it because it's our home. It's our place that we're filling with memories, and I don't have to keep it absolutely perfectly spotlessly clean. We live here, and it's okay for a house to look lived in. And so I had that realization where I was like, I don't love my house because it's perfect. I love it because it's imperfect. And for whatever reason, that just like was like a light bulb moment, and it made me feel so much better. It just seems so silly. But yeah, so that's kind of where my motherhood, whatever, brain cogs have been turning. And then just a couple other fun things. We finally got like a proper official vacuum. I'm saying that my husband got it for me for my Valentine's Day present because it was like $150, and that's just like, so much pain to have to spend that much money on something. But also, it's something I've been wanting since we got married. So if you're somebody that is getting ready to get married and you're putting a wedding registry together, or you know someone that is getting ready to get married and putting a wedding registry together, put a nice vacuum on there. Because they're expensive, but they are so nice. So we just got that, and that has been bringing me like ridiculous amounts of joy. And then we finally, I got a bird feeder put up in the backyard, and it's been making me so happy. The first morning there was just a couple of, I think it's like the tufted titmouse birds or whatever. There was just a couple of them, and then like and that night there was a cardinal, like a lady cardinal on the ground, and then the next day there were like chickadees and stuff, and it has been so much fun. I have been wanting to get a bird feeder put up since we moved into this house, and we finally have one, and I'm just so happy about it. And so these are kind of like my simple joys. I've got my lovely vacuum, I've got a bird feeder, and my sourdough that I'm able to kind of do that again. But yeah, that's all that I have to talk about today. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast episode and that you enjoyed talking about knitting and books and all that fun stuff. I hope that you're all doing very well. Thank you so much for watching all the way through here to the end. One more quick note. I do apologize if you left a comment on either of my last 2 videos. I meant to say this at the beginning of this video, but I forgot about it. I am so sorry. There have been a few comments that it's been like over 2 weeks and I have not responded to you. And in my head, I thought I had responded. And so then I randomly was like looking at my YouTube dashboard thing and was like, oh no, I never answered those comments. I'm a terrible person. Like, not quite, but so I do apologize. I absolutely love it when people leave comments on my videos, and particularly in the last few, you guys have been just absolutely the sweetest human beings and so lovely and nice. So I do really appreciate it, but I do apologize. I'm just not the best at responding quickly to your comments. I read all of them and I absolutely love it, but sometimes it takes me a while to answer back. But I'm gonna try and get those comments responded to before this video goes up. But anyway, thank you so much for watching and supporting this channel. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will see you all soon on the next one. Bye!